I'm here at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill with Dr. Barbara Fredrickson, who's the director of the Positive Emotions and Psychophysiology lab. And we're going to be talking about positivity, the positivity ratio, inner peace, writing, maybe, and a few interesting things. So, hi Barbara, and thank you for taking the time to talk.
Welcome to Chapel Hill on your big adventure.
Thanks. So, I wanted to ask you about the positivity ratio. Maybe for those who are not familiar with the concept, can you explain briefly what it is?
What we found in our research is that there's a tipping point ratio, a sort of an optimal level of positive to negative emotions that people can experience in daily life. And all emotions are useful and appropriate in the right situation, and yet we still can do better if we experience more positive emotions than negative emotions. And what we found is that the tipping point above which people are more likely to flourish and be resilient and generative and creative is 3 to 1, that we need at least 3 positive emotions to lift us up for every 1 negative emotion that wears us down. And that allows us to sort of be buoyant and resilient and flexible. But typically, people's positivity ratios are around 2 to 1. So the typical American, as from what we can tell so far from our data, is not quite at that level of flourishing, not depressed or with an anxiety disorder either. If people have real emotional disturbances, their ratio is 1 to 1 or lower.
Right.
So most of us, most days, might be around 2 to 1. And we find that the flourishing among us are above 3 to 1.
Right. So, is it true also that it goes the other way, right? The same way there's a tipping point upwards, towards flourishing, there's a tipping point downwards.
Yes.
Kind of the downward spiral and the upward spiral.
Right.
So.
The important thing about emotions is that they are processes. They are events that unfold over time, or experiences that unfold over time. And in a way, each emotion has a little bit of energy to reproduce itself in the next moment. So if we are feeling sad or depressed or hopeless, then we encounter the next situation and we interpret it as a situation that has no hope, and that sort of can bring us further and further in a downward spiral. So there's an interaction between the way emotions feel and how they affect our thinking that sends us either in a downward spiral, and that's been researched for decades. What we're finding more recently is that positive emotions and the expansive thinking that they lead to can create an upward spiral that perpetuates itself over time, where the good feelings with positive emotions spark an open, flexible thinking that allows you to see the good in more aspects of the situation, and so the next moment is more likely to be positive than negative. Not to the point where you'd be oblivious to physical danger or anything like that. We don't have to worry about negative emotions becoming somehow unable to knock on our consciousness when we need them, but each emotion kind of perpetuates itself in a self-sustaining.
And then you mentioned resilience, and that's interesting because I was just about to ask you about that. I mean, it seems to me, when people ask me about going on this trip or like the process I went through the past 3 years, kind of personally myself, I always felt the first step was to build inner strength. But that inner strength to me comes from that kind of that mental or emotional muscle. Comes from these little positive things. So I think about it as a reserve. I think that's a good analogy. You have a reserve that gets depleted from negative events. So if you're hit once or twice, maybe you can still bear it. Because you have that reserve.
It's a lot like physical health. I think that our daily diet of fruits and vegetables contributes to how healthy you're going to be in the long run. Like, I tell my kids this all the time, eating 1 piece of broccoli in October isn't going to be enough. You need to have a steady range of vegetables in your life, not just, an occasional one. And positive emotions are the same way. We can't think I'll have a weekend vacation next month and I'll just work like a dog until then. Do you know what I mean? We need this steady diet, daily experiences of positive emotions. We can't really put them off and do our recovery once or twice a year on vacation.
Well, and like physical exercise, do you think it becomes, you mentioned the word skill as well.
Mm-hmm.
Does it become a little bit addictive? Do you think people, it becomes a habit at least?
Yes, yeah. Actually, that's what we're proposing to study in our next grants, is to look at how positive emotions reinforce wellness behaviors over time and can produce or contribute to what I'm calling an upward spiral of lifestyle change. That when we take on new behaviors because we're looking for a lifestyle change, either changing our diet, changing our fitness, or learning to meditate, things like that, it matters that those activities bring us positive emotions. Because if those activities are just we kind of willpower our way through them, they won't have the staying power.